Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Yep, back again. This time we're going to work on a pandemic project. It's by Okuma. This is the Okuma Classic CL450L. It's a bigger reel, level wind reel for salt water. And it's a nice reel, relatively inexpensive. I think that they retail probably for about $60 or $75, somewhere in that range. And today we're going to show you how to take this apart, how to service it, and how to put it back together again to go fishing. So Okuma's been around a while. It's made in Taiwan, and it was a German engineering company that started it and then had the manufacture done overseas. So this reel in particular is a nice reel. It's got large capacity to it, and for those of you that like trolling with a larger level wind feature, this is a good reel for you to have. So we're starting by taking off all of the exterior pieces. You saw me remove the nut cap, which was held in by a screw, and then a 10mm nut holds the handle on, and then we can remove the start drag. And while I'm doing this, while I'm taking the exterior pieces off, I want to spend a second to thank all of our first responders and essential personnel for all it is that they're helping to do to keep us safe during the pandemic. Your efforts truly are appreciated. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exterior screws on the gear side. Go ahead and take that off. These can come off with either a flat-bladed screwdriver, or in this case you can use a Phillips head. These are larger headed screws, so either will work. They do have a flat-bladed through, and that's why I was using that flat-bladed screwdriver before, because every now and then you get one that sticks pretty good, and the flat blade seems to enable you to get it out without skipping through the channels. And then once loose, you can go back to that Phillips head screwdriver to get the rest of this done. So I've worked on these Okuma reels before, and interestingly enough, underneath this there's a design, or there was a design. I'm not sure if it's true in this reel, but there was a design that's very close to the Shakespeare Tidewater series, and I'll know in a moment when we take this off if that's the case. But regardless, they're strong reels. They have a graphite frame to them. This one says it holds 390 yards of 25-pound braid. This one happens to belong to the president of the local saltwater fishing club, and I noticed he's got it spooled with braid with a pretty heavy leader on it. So probably drop fishing, and in the Northeast here is probably wreck fishing. So we got the 5 pieces out. We should be able to remove the side plate, and yep, this has got the same basic design as the Shakespeare Tidewater series. I'll show you how to service that in just a moment. I'm going to remove the spool. When you're servicing a level wind reel, the first thing you want to do is check the idler gear. That's the plastic gear that goes between the spool drive here and the worm drive, which is going to drive the level wind feature. You want to make sure all of the teeth are uniform and that they're not chipped. That's the #1 failure for a level wind reel. Okay, I'm noticing that this one is fine. I'm going to bring the level wind feature over to the side. And we're just going to go ahead and check the pawl, making sure that it's okay, and making sure that it gets lubricated as part of the service. So a pawl is a cylinder, and it's got a V shape on the end of it, and that V shape, the 2 wings, kind of rides in the groove of the worm gear. You can kind of see it here, and that's good. It's no damage there. And when you're doing your service, make sure you clear that little shoulder on the pawl, because that's where the grease is going to accumulate over time. All right, so we can go ahead and put that back in. You want to put a drop of oil on it. In this case, I'm using Penn Precision Reel Oil. I'll also use the Penn Precision Reel Grease when we go to grease up the pieces. You can tighten that back up, turn it manually, make sure it's in the groove, which it is, and then we can go ahead and finish the tightening there. Now that plastic gear does not need lubrication, but you can put grease on there because it's going to interact with the metal gear underneath, the one that's going to drive the worm gear. And that's what I'm doing here. And then I'm also going to get grease into the bushing in the back of this case. Now this case does not have a bearing adjuster on this side. It's got a solid bushing, and you just want to take care with that you get some grease in there, otherwise the reel will squeal. This reel's got line on it. I don't like servicing reel with lines. I always recommend as part of a service to get rid of the line from year to year, but we're going to leave that to John to go do that. I'm going to just take a paper towel now and clear the old grease off of the spool, and the back end of this reel service is essentially done. Okay, we'll just put a light coating of grease on this so that when it goes back through the spool gear, it will perform nicely. All right, we'll set that aside. Now we'll come over and we'll deal with this side. So this has got bushings on it as well. And to service this wheel, you're going to do two things. You're going to remove the C-clip here, or E-clip, and these three pieces, and that'll free everything up inside. Sometimes you can just do the E-clip by hand strength, as I've done here. Just grab one of the prongs on each side. Sometimes you need a little bit more help, and you can use a little pick. You'll notice that I'm putting my pieces into a parch tray. It's just the bottom of a jug, and that parch tray does help me keep track of all the pieces and parts. I also recommend that you take pictures along the way, and the reason you should be taking pictures is if you get stuck, if you look in your parts tray and you can't figure out where a piece or a part came from, if you have a part out of sequence, if your reel is turning poorly after you've serviced it, well then you need to go back and check and see how it came apart to make sure that you can put it back together the right way. Alright, that's 3 of these screws that hold the main bridge in. Notice the 4th one is not a bridge screw. And then we want to come do 2 more things. We want to remove the spring from the post here, otherwise that could shoot. And we want to remove the jack, which is held on by a small screw up top here. All of those pieces go into my parts tray. And now we can just kind of remove everything. You can pull up on the jack. That's going to free your yoke assembly. Notice you got the 2 springs behind it, so let's take those off so we don't lose them. And now we can push the bridge assembly through. So this is, the back of the bridge is actually disconnected now because we took the E-clip off. So let's take the bridge off so you can see how you're going to put it back together. They're just sitting over some studs. In this case, that's just a little tight. There we go. So when you go to reinstall, this is how you're going to reinstall it, right? You're not going to be able to keep it on the bridge. And then we're going to take the anti-reverse dog and the little pivot point that it has on it, and we're going to take that out. Remember, there's the spring on the back of it because we disconnected that spring, so don't lose the spring for that anti-reverse dog. Now we can push through on the gear assembly and remove that. And it's just time for a cleaning now. We just have some older greases in there. Under here we have our bushing and our little sleeve that goes onto the main gear assembly. To clean it up, I'm just going to give it a quick shot of some penetrating oil. That'll help loosen the old grease. I'm going to use a paper towel first. And as I do that, you'll notice that my one hand does have a plastic or vinyl glove on it. I do like to use that there to keep the greases and the like off of it. I've frequently asked why don't I have it on both hands. Well, I have trouble working with that gloved hand on my dominant hand that I use to use most of the tools. And so I kind of figure half is better than none. At least cover my left hand with that. Okay, I've got most of that out of there. I'm going to take a cotton swab and get some of the older grease out. It seems to be hanging behind. But overall, this is a pretty clear reel. You'll notice on this side we have a bushing as well. We don't have a bearing. So this reel is a non-ball bearing reel. But that's okay. It's a pretty solid performer. Okay. Bridge goes into the parts tray. Side plate comes to the back here. Let's clean up our yoke assembly. This has just got some old grease on it. If you can't wipe it off with a paper towel, go ahead and use some steel wool. This is dried, so that would contribute to it being a little bit of a slow performer. We have that. Check your pinion gear. Make sure all the teeth are straight, that there's no bends or chips or otherwise broken. Some of you that have seen some of my other projects know I'm working on a project for a wheelboat captain, a fishing boat captain. I'm working on a bunch of his wheels, and they have a lot of worn main gears in them, and you can just see the wear on them. All right, so I've put the grease onto the yoke, shoulders. Now we're going to put the grease onto the pinion gear. And this is the grease I was referring to before. It's a Penn Precision wheel grease. And I don't care what manufacturer's grease you use, but I do care that you use a fishing wheel grease. I'm going to put a little bit more into the bushing area. I use an artist's brush for that. We're going to take those two small springs that we saw before. I'm going to put those over the piece. And then we can seat the yoke assembly on top of those springs and just set that off to the side for a moment. We want to come over here and make sure that the main gear gets serviced and that the drag washers are okay. You can see we've had these greased, and they're all kind of greased up pretty good here. This is a good place to take a picture as you disassemble the main gear. You want to know what pieces and parts go where. So we're going to push this through. If you did remove this, this is the anti-reverse ratchet. Notice that there is it's on a rectangular or an oval shape, and notice the orientation of the teeth. You don't need to remove that, but if you did, that's where you would take a picture so that you know how to get it back together again. We're going to push the assembly out. These have felt washers, so the felt washers need to be inspected to make sure that there's no tears. And if they're solid and ready to go again, the service requires that you put oil onto the felt washers to keep them flexible. We have that hard washer in the back. Let's take that off. Clean it all to make sure that there's nothing there. All we have here is discoloration. Check the teeth. If the teeth are clogged with old grease, just go ahead and use a hard bristle brush. You could also use a wire brush if you want. And if you really have some particularly dried grease, you can use a thin blade of a screwdriver, or you can use a toothpick or something else to work that out. But in this case, this is just fine. We're going to put the hard washer back onto the shaft. We're going to put the main gear back onto the shaft. I'm going to take this opportunity to grease the main gear before I put the washers back in. And we'll show you the washer stack. So we have a felt washer, two felt washers. We have the cap washer, the second keyed washer, and the eared washer. So we have a three metal washer set, 6 in total, with a cap washer. The eared washer always belongs in the middle of the stack, and those two ears are going to ride in the slots of this main gear. So we're going to start with the wider one. That was the one that was on the bottom. We're going to nest that in there, and we're going to use that reel oil. Put a couple of drops on that oil, onto the felt washer. You're inspecting that washer as you do this. You want to make sure that there are no chips or cracks and that it remains flexible. In this case, that's flexible. I'm going to go ahead and put the second one in now. Do the same thing. A couple of drops of oil onto the washer. Now you take the eared washer. This is the middle one. You can see the two slots on the main gear. Go ahead and put that in. Then the last washer. One more time with the oil. We can put the last of the keyed washers on and the cap washer. So that's your main gear assembly now. Alright, we can take our main gear assembly. We can place that. Oops, we need there's the bushing in the collar of the sleeve here. Let's go ahead and put that on. And we can put that into the hold fast here. And what I like to do here is put the star drag back on here to hold that assembly in place. This is one of the few reels where I find that it's very valuable to do it that way. I've had these things fall out and roll all over the place if you don't do that. So to me, that's a very valuable piece that's important to do. Okay, with that done now, we can grab our jack. The jack is going to ride over the yoke, and you can see there's a little stud in the eccentric. The points on the jack go to the back side, and it sits like this. We have that little screw that goes in there. And I just got lucky. Me and little pieces don't get that lucky that often. And it's a threaded screw, so take your time and make sure that it goes in properly. And make sure it's tight. Okay, there we go. Next up then is the anti-reverse. There's a little bit of grease that I didn't get cleaned on that. Let's get that off of there. So the anti-reverse is next. That has a dog on it. It has a pivot. If you've had the reel apart, you'll notice that the pivot came out. And it also has the spring. So let's put the pivot back in. That's the way it faces. There's a hole in the side case for that pivot. So that it mounts like that. Now that pivot point there is going to go into a hole in this side plate, so be aware of that when you go to remount this. Alright, we got to put that little spring back on before we go any further. I use a little pick just to grab the slot of the spring, kind of bring it over the point. I apologize if that's off camera at the moment. There we go. So that's our properly loaded spring. You can see the orientation of the dog. The dog needs to sit in the path there of that main gear. And now we can take our plate, and our plate has the holes that line up 1, 2, 3. The fourth hole on the inside is the hole for the pivot on the anti-reverse dog. So those line up and go over. Make sure you hear the snap in. And this is a good time to test to make sure that this anti-reverse dog is going to be working properly. So spin your main gear. If it's not working, come over here and pull up on that. Okay, at this point what you want to do before you attach the screws is put that C-clip or E-clip back in. That's going to hold your main gear to the bridge. Again, usually you can do that by hand. I wasn't very successful on that, so I'm just going to use a little bit of an assist here. Now you can hear and you can see that dog is working properly. And we have 3 bridge screws now to go put in. They were all the same size. It's important to note that when you do this reel, or any reel, you want to make sure that all of the pieces that you take off, things like the bridge plates and the like, if they're not the same size, then you want to notice where the one that was longer or shorter belongs, because if you don't put it in the right sequence, it can interfere with the operation of a reel. All right, this is number 2 here. It doesn't matter which sequence you go in. I just like to put the one in that's near where the pivot for the dog is first, but if you're holding down on the bridge, it's not going to matter. Okay, so if you like what you're seeing, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to my channel. I do a lot of fishing reel services, all types of reels. Today we happen to be working on a large saltwater level wind reel, but that's not always the case. And if you like what you're seeing, and subscribe, hit the notification button. That way you will get notified when I post new videos and you won't miss any of these. Not only do I repair the reels, but I also do some series on the fishing reel business and other things that you may find interesting. All right, here's your plate. I'm going to line those up with the holes for the side plate, just like that. I did notice on the way out that all of the side plate screws are the same. Now, the last time I saw somebody working on one of these reels, I happened to be in a bait shop, and they had a little service department there. And I just started chatting up with the fellow who was doing the work. He was doing nice work. And he had a mechanical screwdriver that he was using to take these screws in and out. And I often get asked, can I use a battery-powered screwdriver or drill kind of a thing? And my response generally is no. If you're going to use one, I mean, this just becomes tedium because you got 5 of these big screws you're working on here. But if you don't have the hand strength, I'd say you're okay taking them out, although you always risk the ability to strip the head of the screw. But taking them out generally doesn't represent a problem. Putting them back in with a case like this, you can risk over-tightening it and fracturing the case. So if you're going to use them, I recommend that you leave that screw short and finish the last turn or 2 by hand. And I realize that not everybody has good hand strength, and sometimes you need that. And if that's the case, then go ahead and use it, but leave it short. Okay, let's give it a little test right away, right? So we said you don't have a bearing adjuster on that side, but you do have a spool adjuster over here. And if that wasn't running smoothly, you can tighten it or loosen it to your preference. But that's all you get there. Okay, we have the handle. Oh, actually, a piece that just came out with the handle. You have a little tension washer that goes between the star adjuster and the handle. Then you have the handle. Then we have our 10mm nut that we started this exercise by taking off. Then you want your 10mm wrench. Now, the trick to aligning this nut with the hole so that you can get the cap on is, generally speaking, you want to have the, that's the wrong wrench. Here it is. You want to have the flat portion of the nut perpendicular through that screw hole, and you should be able to get the screw cap in like that so that it lines up. Otherwise you're going to be moving about trying to find that. So if you like this video, please indicate the like. If you have questions, please leave the questions in the comment section. I do try to respond to all comments and questions. It doesn't have to be about this reel. If you have a reel that you have open and you're just struggling with it, or if you're having a difficult time diagnosing a particular problem, then by all means leave the question. If I know the answer, I'll try and help you with that. And then finally, if you have a reel that needs to be repaired, well, you can see I'm repairing reels here. I do that by mail, and if you contact me by the email on the business card that follows, I will provide you with that repair information. So there you go. A nice working reel for John to take fishing again. Again, a second thanks to our first responders and essential personnel working hard during the pandemic. And I appreciate everything it is that you're doing. And with that, let's sign off. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.